Hey guys, this is Dave here with Full Armor Gaming, coming to you guys with another in my How to DM series. Last video I did on kind of like some parameters on making a one-shot. So today, that seemed to have a lot of interest, so I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. So today what we're going to do is we are going to talk about some of the enemies that I like to use at my one-shots that help make them feel epic, but make them much more easy to have control over the actual boss fight. So today I've got a whole bunch of cool stuff for you. We're gonna break it down kind of in level groups on different types of monsters I like to use per level groups. So stick with me here and let's see what we got. Okay, we're back. And so at this point you have decided you want to run a one-shot. Maybe you're new to DMing, maybe you're not, but you know that you've got a group of people and you're gonna plan for one session, and you want to be able to have a story that will be able to fit into that one session, be concise, and be able to be easily summarized in one shot. It's the whole point of the one shot. So today I want to break down another aspect of creating a one-shot. My last video was a lot more on like time frames, like how to chop stuff up to make it fit into a one-shot. And so today I'm going to be doing, these are going to be some monsters that monster types or variants that I like to use in my one-shots. And I'm going to kind of also break down strategies on why I like to use them, and maybe even some more strategies that you can utilize with your own flair that would make running an encounter in a one-shot much more manageable and much more controllable from the sense of time and story. A couple things before we break into the actual like level groups of monsters I like to use. I want to talk about a couple of things that I like to focus on, like the main reason I'm picking these kinds of enemies and why I'm picking them. When it comes to one-shot encounters, now I'm just going to preface this. This is my opinion. This is how I like to run combat. This is not how everyone needs to run combat. It's not saying how this is how combat should be ran, but disclaimer said, okay? I like to manage what I think is the most important currency in combats, and that's action economy. When you have, and everything that I'm going to be sharing with you today is based off a group of 5 players. No matter what level group I'm in, it's based on 5 players. That's what I like to run my one-shots as groups of 5. That seems to be my sweet spot. So everything I'm going to be giving you is based off 5 players. You can adjust or, enhance or whatever based off whatever group you have. I think action economy is the most important thing to factor in when it comes to creating a combat, especially in a one-shot for 2 reasons, really. First reason is there is so much power in action economy. If you have 100 rats going against one really strong guy, chances are, in the way D&D works, those 100 rats could very easily win, depending on what that warrior can do. If the warrior can only ever take 1 out every turn, 100 rats are going to win because they just have more abilities to attack. So action economy is very important. You can be super strong, but if you can only ever make 1 swing and only ever do against 1 target, it will take you a long time to wipe out a whole group of 5 players. That is something that needs to be factored in when it comes to crafting your encounter. So the reason I say that is because number 2 is when it comes to action economy and combat, that also determines how much time goes by between when each player gets to take their turn. For those of us that have sat in a player seat, maybe you're brand new to D&D completely, but if you've sat in a player seat before, it never really feels good when it's like, I take my turn, I am a 2-handed barbarian, and I'm level 4, I get 1 attack. My turn comes around. I roll a 3 on the dice for a total of 9, 8, whatever. I miss. Okay, that's my whole turn. My whole turn happened in a couple seconds. Okay, cool. Now all the other players get to go. But when the DM has 6 players that they control, it can be a long time before I get another chance to swing. And if I swing and miss, and then I swing and miss, and then I swing and miss, boy, that cannot be a very fun combat for that player. So the reason that I pick a lot of these enemies specifically is because I think it kind of helps facilitate the weaknesses that people can experience in combat. Because, you know, especially with one shot, there might only be one encounter, or there might maybe be 2. But I want to make sure that that encounter is fun and that the players feel like cool stuff happened for them. Now, sometimes the dice just don't like them. And that's all there is to be said. Sometimes that's just how it goes down. But my choices for the kind of things that I like to do is based a lot around action economy. So the first level group that I kind of factor for is like level 1 to level 4. Now, I don't do a lot of one-shots really from anything lower than level 4, just because of how I run my one-shots. I do a monster hunting guild. Normally, there's not a lot of level 1 monster hunters. You know what I mean? But for the sake of this video, I will still go ahead and break down that level 1 to level 4 group. So to give an example of maybe an enemy or a group of enemies that a player might encounter in one of my one-shots would be a very, very iconic creature is an owlbear. So the reason I choose an owlbear is there's a couple reasons. So first, it has an AC of 13, which is relatively low. It's relatively easy to hit, which means that when it comes to my turn, the chances of a barbarian or a fighter or a rogue or something like that hitting it are higher because the AC is relatively low. There's a higher chance of their succeeding on their turn. That feels good for the player. They have a pretty high HP value of 59. They're fairly fast. They have 40 feet of movement. They're probably faster than most players are. That can feel intense. They can get around quickly. But the other reason is an owlbear has multi-attack. And that's one of the early things. So that means when it gets an attack turn, it can attack twice. Which at level 4, most players shouldn't have the ability to do that unless they have like a bonus action or something like that. It has a +7 to hit. You know, that's fairly high for that level. And it does 2d8 + 5 damage. That is fairly significant at that level. It feels like it hits hard. It hits a lot. And it's fast. It's got high hit points. It can feel threatening. Now, if you've got a group of 5 and, you know, let's say they're level 4, one owlbear is probably not going to be a lot. So what I like to do is I like to vary things up. They come across a den of owlbears where there might be 2 adults, or it might be an owlbear and it's got 2 adolescents in there, or it could be, you know, something along those variants. I try to keep the numbers when it comes to a one shot of enemies to like 2 enemies, 3 at the most, but at least 2, because what that does is it lets players have options on the battlefield for 1, and 2 owlbears is rather intimidating. And one of the other things I like to do is that normally I don't reveal them both at the same time. I will have one. They think, now if they roll really high perception, maybe they'll find the other one hiding in the shadows or something like that. But if they don't, you know, if they don't roll a perception check or they don't ask to look around the room when they walk in, then essentially they can start combat with one owlbear and then be surprised later on when there's a second one hiding in the shadows. That can make it very intense on the battlefield for players. So that is one of the things I like to do. It's an example. I'm not saying only use owlbears, but you can. I'm trying to explain the reasons why I choose them as my example. Low AC, high HP pool, because if most likely everyone is hitting it, if it has a low HP pool, well then, okay, everyone hit it in one round and it died. Well, that's not a very fun combat, and that didn't last very long. You want it to take a few rounds of everyone beating on it for it to go down. That makes it feel more epic, it feels stronger, everything like that. But hopefully like that makes sense as to why I chose I essentially, for a group of 4, I would do 2 owlbears is what I would do. So that is my bracket for the level 1 to level 4. So now this is probably the level bracket I use the most, and it's level 5 to level 9. Now, once again, a lot of my one-shots are monster hunting, so I like to make them difficult. I like to make them dangerous because, once again, monster hunters are not known for long life expectancy. So one of the enemies I like to utilize in this bracket of 5 to 9, depending on what the party makeup is of five members, is giants. I really like using giants. And the reason I like using giants is there's a couple big reasons. One, low AC. Most of them have fairly low AC. For this example, I'm going to use a frost giant. Frost giants have an AC of 15. They have 149 HP. Okay, they're hitboxes. They got a speed of 40. They can move around. At this 5 to 9, they're probably not the fastest thing on the field at this point, but they're at least decent. They have immunities to cold damage, which can be valuable. But once again, they also have multi-attack. So the benefits of that is there's higher action economy. When they get an attack, they get 2 attacks. So that's extra action economy. So if I was using an enemy that only attacked once, one enemy is taking up the space of 2 enemies when it comes to action economy. But that's like less HP that I'm keeping track of. That's less stats I'm keeping track of. It's less for like another whole turn that has to be taken. It's just one extra roll of the dice. For a frost giant, it speeds up combat for everybody involved. The other reason I really like the frost giants is because they have a pretty high chance to hit with a +9, and they hit hard. Now, the reason that I like this is because when you have something that's a fairly low action economy, where definitely the players are going to be having more turns to attack, you want to make sure that when the enemy lands a blow, it's threatening. I want the players to be like, wait, how much? And all of a sudden, it changes up how everything happens. Because if everyone's like, all right, I'm just going to run in and we're all just going to chop away at this guy's legs until he dies, okay, that is a strategy. But if he multi-attacks against your barbarian and his first attack, does 19 plus 9 cold damage, and now, and the barbarian didn't get a chance to rage before his turn, so he's taking full damage. And he gets hit by both attacks. So, no, he's taking, 52 points of damage in, whatever. So, what's it, 19 plus 9 is 28. So 28, yeah, it'd be 46. Oh, yeah, 56. I don't know. It's a lot of damage. For a level 7, that's a lot of damage. If that happens to the caster, he's probably down in one multi-attack. That can scare the enemy, or scare your players a lot, and scared is good. Now, and this goes down to one of my favorite things, I think it was Gary Gygax that said this, is that your players at any given time should have a 70% chance of survival with a 30% chance to die, but feel like it's the opposite. That is like the rule I run my encounters by, is that there should be a 70% chance that they're going to win every fight they go into for the most part. But they should feel like there's a 70% chance they're going to lose every fight. So that's like that's kind of like the mindset I like to have. So Frost Giants is an example. And really, I like Giants in general because they're just big old meatballs that you can just keep hitting. And everyone feels good because they hit on a lot of their attacks. And, there's not really a lot of resistances or anything like that you don't have to worry about. They don't have to have like magic weapons to be able to kill them. Nothing like that. They do have a ranged attack with a great bow attack as well. That does still hit really hard, and it reduces their movement speed as a frost giant specifically. And then, they also have the war cry feature, the bonus action. Once again, this is just an example of what I like to use. But to vary things up, sometimes what I like to do, like let's say my 5 to 9 group is a level of like they're all 9s. Okay, a frost giant, or maybe even 2 frost giants, might not actually be that much of a challenge for them. I like to augment my enemies. Maybe make one of the frost giants a chieftain, or he's some sort of high-ranking frost giant, and the other one that's in here with him is one of their minions, or is his right-hand man, or something like that. And so one of the things that I like to do to just boost just a little bit an enemy, like we'll say for this example, the frost giant, is I give him a legendary action, or 2, depending on what the situation is. But for those of you that don't know, a legendary action is an action that your enemy can expend at the end of anyone's turn in combat, and it resets at the beginning of the frost giant's next turn. So like if he has one legendary action he can spend, that means after he's taken his attack, sometime before his next turn, at the end of another player's turn, he can choose to take his attack action. Now, it could be something along the lines of he gets to take one swing with his frost axe, or he can do one shot with his great bow. Just something to add a little bit of extra on that action economy. Just to give him a little bit more of a scare tactic. That like, ooh, the person that goes right after the frost giant, let's say it's the fight or the rogue, and the rogue runs up, goes to take his turn, attacks, everything like that. As he ends his turn, the frost giant is going to take a legendary action, turn, and just take a swing at him with that frost axe. That's right there, that just cut right in the back of his leg. He's going to turn and he's going to take a legendary action swing at him. And all of a sudden, that, level 9 or, level 8 rogue just took 28 points of damage in a single hit if he gets hit by it. You know what I mean? Something along those lines. So that's my level 5 to level 9. This is where I like to operate. I honestly, I feel like for most one-shots, 5 to 9 is a great level range to play them at, because martial classes have their extra attacks by then, as long as they're not multi-classing. And most casters have access to their 3rd level spells at that point, which are a lot of their really fun spells. It's more fun for everybody involved. That's my personal opinion. I'm not saying it has to be that way, but the reason I'd say that's my favorite bracket is because when you get up to the higher levels, DMing actually gets a lot harder, because these players can do a lot more cool stuff as they get to be higher levels, and you have to account for that. So my opinion is, if you're brand new to DMing, the level 1 to level 4 bracket is probably the best way to go. But if you've played before, and maybe this is your first time DMing, but you've been a player for a while and you kind of understand how things work, 5 to 9 is a great bracket. I would not recommend the first time you go out DMing to do a level 10 to level 15 bracket. I just wouldn't recommend it. There's just way too many factors to keep track of when it comes to what your players can do, what they can't. So going into the level 10 to 15 bracket is where we can really start to dial things up. It gets to be more fun for us as DMs, because we can pick enemies that have a lot more cool things they can do. So once it gets to this bracket, action economy is still important, still very important, but the players are going to have lots of stuff they can do. And if you're going against one big bad, or because I still don't like to do more than at most 3 enemies, just because of how long their turns can take, because especially players at this point have a lot they can do on their turn. So we can really stretch out the amount of time in between each player's turn. If you have 5 players that all have, a couple minutes on their turn, and then you've got 5 enemies that all take a couple minutes on each one of their turns, it can be very long. So I actually like to, when we get to the 10 to 15 bracket, I like to, for the most part, keep it to one big enemy, or I do some kind of variance, maybe 2, but I don't normally ever go more than 2 once we get into this bracket. An example that I'll use for this, a good example for a level 10 to 15 bracket, would be an adult red dragon. Classic D&D enemy. Like when players are thinking monster hunting, most players are thinking, I'm hunting a dragon. Everyone is happy when you plop a dragon mini on the table. Nobody is like, oh, another dragon. No, everybody loves it. So, adult red dragons have an AC of 19. They have a lot of hit points at 256. So, 19, getting harder to hit at this point. Now, level 10 to 15s at this point, they should have a couple magic items, all that kind of stuff. Not incredibly difficult to hit an AC 19, but it is getting a little bit more difficult, so some of the attacks may miss. But they have a fly speed of 80 feet. That opens up the possibilities of what you can do with this dragon, especially depending on if they're fighting it in its own lair, if they're fighting it out in the air, kind of all of that makes a big difference. But so one of the things they have is legendary resistances. At this point, your players are going to have access to some pretty powerful spells. Spells that if this lands, it's going to be a problem. It could shut down my enemy. So a legendary resistance is you can do this 3 times a day if it's out and about, or you can do it 4 times a day if it's in its own lair, according to the new 2024 combat rules. Which means that if it fails its saving throw against something, 3, or we'll say you're fighting in the lair, so 4 times in that combat, you can just expend a legendary resistance and it automatically succeeds. So it's like, okay, I roll, let's say they're trying to banish, let's say that the bard runs up and tries to banish the dragon to another plane of existence. Charisma saving throw, I'm pretty sure. I think it's a charisma saving throw. Charisma saving throw. Okay, I roll, I have a +6 on my save. I roll, I fail the save. Okay. That would be detrimental to our fight if all of a sudden the dragon is just gone for a minute. Okay. Legendary resistance. Even though I failed the save, I'm going to expend one of those to get that. Now, a lot of players at this level, they know that we got to burn through those legendary resistances. So the other thing it has multi-attack, and it uses 3 attacks on its turn when it uses its rends, or it can replace one of its attack to cast its spell Scorching Ray. So rend has a 10 feet reach, it has a +14 to hit. Most likely that's going to hit everybody every time. Now, not everyone, but most likely it will. And it does decent damage, 1d10 +8 with an extra 2d4 fire. It's decent damage. But the big thing is that it has fire breath. So an adult red dragon, it's all about positioning for that fire breath, because it's a 60-foot cone with a DC 21 dex save. That's a big deal. Most of your frontline people probably don't have super high dex saves. They're probably going to get hit by it. That is going to be 17d6 fire damage, and then half of that on a success. So unless it's a rogue, they're gonna take damage getting hit by that one way or the other. And it's a 60-foot cone. You could hit the whole group with this thing. So, and then at the end of your turn, you get to roll a d6. And if you get a 5 or 6, you get your fire breath back. All of that to say, it's got commanding presence, so it's got the frightened status that people have to save against. There's a lot of things that it just does that you don't necessarily have to take a whole turn for, but it definitely adds to the fight. So I kind of got like sunk into the stats of the red dragon. But the reason I've been saying all this is because as players get higher level, they want more of a challenge. But the hard part when it comes to a one-shot is the higher level they go, kind of the longer those fights can go. So I'm giving you examples of enemies I like to use because I have found that they're able to keep them in that time frame so that you can finish off that one shot in one shot. So like I said, I've got all kinds of enemies that I've used. These are just some prime examples, and I wanted to use them so that I can explain why I like to use them. So like when it comes to the Adult Red Dragon, a lot of people should be able to hit it. Feels good to hit it. Scary when you get hit. You get hit by its legendary fire breath. Oh man, I don't want to get hit by that. But if you do, the battle just suddenly changes when multiple players get hit by his fire breath. We are on our back. We're on our heels now because we all just took, you know, if you didn't save, it's like 59 points of fire damage average. That's intense, you know? So all that to say, these are some examples I like to use. I would love to hear what kind of examples you guys have as well. And then also, obviously like and subscribe so we can keep this kind of information coming to you guys. But if you have some creative ideas of stuff you've liked to do, and I've got other stories of stuff I really like going against having my enemies go against hags or players, not my enemies. My players are not my enemies. I like using hags a lot because it's a lot of mind game stuff, which is a lot of fun too. But all that to say that the whole point of this video was to try to break down to you some strategies to use when choosing your enemies so that a one-shot can stay a one-shot. All right. And so I hope this has been helpful. If you guys have anything else you would like to know more about, please, comment about it. That's essentially what this video was made off of, was a comment. So if there's anything else I can help you answer when it comes to one-shots, please comment, let me know. Share this with other DMs, or maybe you're a forever DM and you've got a player that's kind of talked about it. Share him this stuff. Be like, hey, well, let's just do a one-shot. Let's see if you like it. But all that to say, I hope this has been helpful. And yeah, so my name is Dave, and I'm with Full Armor Gaming, and I hope this has been great for you guys. So we'll see you guys in the next one.